So how did the idea for the Secret of Kells come along?
It was actually a college project that I was doing when I was in college. I was originally thinking of doing it as my final year film, but obviously it kind of grew beyond that. But the idea was really that I was thinking we should try and do something to adapt, Celtic art into 2D animation. We thought it would make sense and it would be kind of different looking animation than was being done anywhere else in the world. So we started looking at the Book of Kells, and we were looking at the Book of Kells more or less for the style, to find the style, and then we found the story also there because the Book of Kells had such an amazing history, all the legends and stuff around it, that we kind of found the story in there.
Okay, I mean, the film absolutely has its own unique look. Can you just tell the people listening how much work goes into drawing a 2D animated feature? Because, I mean, most of the time now they're done, by computer.
Yeah, we did use computers, but not for the actual animation. The animation was all drawn by hand, but we colored it on the computer. But yeah, there's like between 12 and 24 frames per second for each character. So you can imagine if there's many characters on screen, how much extra work that is too. And the drawings were quite tricky because it wasn't traditional 2D animation, Disney style. We were trying to do something that was a little bit of a unique style, more based on the actual Celtic art we were looking at. So for some animators it was tricky, and some people really enjoyed it. But yeah, it was 3 years of work for nearly 200 people in 5 different countries, so it was a big undertaking.
And the film it's kind of like a double-edged sword in a way. I mean, it caters to older adults that appreciate the history, and yet it's this beautiful, well-told story that caters to kids. Is that what you were going for? What were you going for when you released this film?
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that. Yeah, that's what we kind of went for. I mean, originally I was developing the story, and it was skewing a little bit older, and it was feeling a bit too much like a history lesson, a little bit too esoteric. And when we worked with our French producers, Les Amateurs, they really encouraged me to kind of rethink the movie through the eyes of the kids, Brendan and Aisling, and that's what I really worked on with the screenwriter Fabrice Lukowski and my co-director Nora. We tried to make it as universal as possible by seeing this world, which might be very unusual or not something you'd expect to see in a cartoon, but seeing it through the eyes of the kid, Brendan, I think hopefully makes it fairly universal and accessible for kids and adults.
Okay, as far as the design goes, I mean, early in the beginning, you see a lot of those stained glass pictures, and it really tries to, I think, it tries to emulate that. Where did you get that specific look for the film?
Well, what it was a kind of a confluence of different influences, but the main one was the Book of Kells itself, which is kind of one of the high points of medieval art, and it's considered Ireland's national treasure. And artwork from the Book of Kells has kind of found its way into nearly every aspect of Irish design. It's kind of it was on our currency for a long time, and every Irish pub you go into anywhere in the world would have some design from the Book of Kells in it. So that was our starting point. But we also looked at Eastern European animation and Samurai Jack and things like that were very graphic, very decorative sort of styles used in animation.
Okay, I mean, you have a very good cast as well. How did it feel to work with Brendan Gleeson on this film?
Oh, he was a really great supporter of the film really early on, like even in the earliest drafts back in 2000. We met him. He was a friend of a friend sort of thing. He knew one of our producer, Paul Young. He was friends with one of his neighbours, and so we kind of got to him that way, around the back door kind of thing, rather than going directly through his agent. And so when we got to chat to him and tell him our idea, he was really enthusiastic. I think he's been a school teacher at one point early in his career, and he's also a fluent Irish speaker, a Gaelic speaker, so he was really enthusiastic about the idea of the project. So he was sort of involved from very early on. He even did a voiceover for a kind of promotional trailer that we did back in 2000 when we first started to develop the idea. So he was kind of happy to see that the film finally went into production, and he was happy to come in and do a voice. And then later he also helped a lot with the publicity in Ireland.
Okay, we discussed the unique look of the film, but the music as well is absolutely beautiful. What went into that?
Well, I mean, early on, I had the idea of working with Keela, mainly because they kind of seemed to be doing with music what we were trying to do with the animation, in that they blended old traditional Irish music with influences from all over the world and modern music. And so they were interested in being involved, but they weren't that experienced in writing scores for films. So we were lucky enough to be able to work with Bruno Coulet, who's a really great French composer. He also wrote the score for the animated film Coraline, which was also one of the nominees this year for the Oscars. And he was actually working on Coraline more or less at the same time he was working with us. and then Keela would take his music and arrange it and play it with traditional Irish instruments and sort of bring an influence that way. So between Bruno and Keela, I think we got something fairly unusual for the soundtrack.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, altogether, the film altogether is very, very unique. It's very different. What are some of your inspirations, filmmaking, art? You know, where do you get all these ideas from? How do they come together?
Yeah, well, I think what it was is that we'd been working on the film for so long that a lot of our influences from over the years kind of merged and kind of ended up with a fairly densely layered set of influences from all different sources. I mean, not just in film, but also in, comic books and some of the old live-action films. I'm not such a big fan of modern live-action. Not even so much that I'm not a big fan, it's just that it wouldn't be a major influence. But we were looking at stuff like, Ivan the Terrible and some German expressionism and things like that even from like the early part of the 20th century for influence there. And we also really liked the Vienna painters, like Gustav Klimt and Alphonse Mucha, all the Art Nouveau stuff, because they're very decorative and seem to be along the same lines as the artwork we were looking at from the Middle Ages.
Okay, considering how long you worked on the film, was it hard to edit? I've spoken to a few people, and they kind of felt that certain parts of the film, mainly like the end, that they felt the movie could have gone on forever,
Yeah.
But specifically, the just the way Aisling, the way she kind of fades out of the story towards the end. How hard was it to kind of put that final bow on the story?
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, I think for us, the one downside that we didn't have is the kind of budget that they have in Pixar or Disney or DreamWorks, where they kind of keep on working on the story right up until the end. And so, in actual fact, we animated about 86 minutes, and we ended up editing it down to about 78, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of editing done at the end to tighten up the story and make it flow. We changed a bit at the beginning, but the one thing I would have liked was to have had more time in the third act to show Brendan growing up and maybe show a little bit more clearly what happened with Aisling, because that's the main question I got asked by kids. But sure, that's the way it worked out.
Okay, what are you looking forward to as far as the future goes with this film? You got the Oscar nomination; it's being released on DVD, but you're here at Comic-Con. You're kind of showcasing it. Well, what do you plan to accomplish?
Well, right now we're just really excited that we're here again. I mean, it's 2 years since I finished working on the film, so it's pretty amazing to be still on this kind of world tour with it. I'm going to Japan next month as well. For me, basically, it's just hoping that as many people as possible can discover it. We don't have a huge marketing budget. We're not a big studio release, so it's really great that the word of mouth is working so well. I mean, it seems to be selling pretty well on DVD already, just 2 days in, and it's ranking pretty high on Amazon and stuff. So I'm just hoping that at Comic-Con more and more people can discover the film and maybe pass on the word to their friends that it's something worth checking out,
Okay, for the people that haven't seen the film that are listening, if you could just kind of give us a pitch, tell them what it's all about. What would you do?
Wow. I suppose it's a Celtic fairy tale set in the Middle Ages, and it's in a fairly unique style. If you like 2D animation, or if you just like animation in general, I think you'll get a kick out of seeing something fairly different than anything else that's out there.
Okay, last question. What was your favorite part of the film?
My favorite part of the film is definitely when Aisling sings the song to Pangerbon and turns her into kind of a spirit cat to get the key to free Brendan, because it's a really nice kind of confluence of music and animation and design, and I just felt that everything kind of came together really well in that sequence.